Hello everyone, welcome to Philosophy 15. I'm Robert Talisse.
I'm Scott Aikin.
We are the authors of Pragmatism, Pluralism, and the Nature of Philosophy, out with Routledge, and also the second edition, also out with Routledge, of Why We Argue and How We Should. These are unscripted conversations among two philosophy professors about whatever happens to be on our mind. And today, Scott has come to the table with some thoughts about the fragment that is attributed to Anaximander. Buckle up.
The pre-Socratic philosopher Anaximander, Thales' student. Yeah. It's in fact considered to be the first quotation of philosophy in the Western tradition, quoted from Simplicius's commentary on Aristotle's physics. Here's how it goes. Anaximander said that APEIRON, the unbounded, the limitless, was the arche, was the origin of things, the element of things that are. He was first to introduce this name for the arche. He says that the arche is neither water, so denying Thales, nor any of the other things called elements, but some other nature, which is APEIRON, again, unbounded, out of which come to be all the heavens and the worlds in them. The things that are perish into the things from which they come to be, according to necessity, for they pay penalty and retribution to each other for their injustice in accordance with the ordering of time. That's some heavy biz.
Is it? I don't even...
What's it mean?
I don't even understand it.
Well, so I guess the first thought is why the unbounded, and then why all this retribution stuff, right? It looks like there's sort of two parts to the fragment, right?
I think I get the APEIRON.
Okay, so let's talk about the APEIRON, and then we'll talk about the retribution stuff.
If you are, here's a non-expert reading of that. So if you are a philosopher broadly in that Milesian, what we now see as the Milesian tradition, these are people who are looking for the fundamental stuff that everything else is composed of.
The arche.
The arche.
And it's the arche.
Beginning,
it's
right.
the one thing.
The beginning, both as a temporal,
right,
metaphysical kind of beginning, but also as an explanatory beginning. That's what
right.
an arche is
the
as well.
Thing, the bottom thing.
Yeah, the thing that the spade turns once you get there. Got it.
Right.
If you are in that business of trying to identify the arche, I could understand why you would quickly come to see that the standard candidates, like Thales and water,
right,
why water won't do it, because water is already too descript. It's already itself a kind of thing. And so you want to say, look, I can understand why one would see as a kind of metaphysical error to say that the arche is itself a kind of stuff. Right. That we can name and point to and fill our glasses and pools with. So I understand, I think, the motivation for, in a way, making a different, seeing the need for the elemental, the metaphysically elemental, to be of a different category.
Right.
APEIRON looks to me like the boundless, the unconstrained,
right,
looks to me like it does that. In fact, you might even think that if you say with Thales that water is the most basic stuff, it's already too descript because water itself has a nature that stands in need of explanation. The unbounded, the limitless, the without constraint, looks like it's the right level of nondescriptness that it couldn't be pointed to.
Right.
So I understand that part.
Right. So,
I think.
So yeah, and so as a consequence, and the contrast with water is really important there. Right. So and so we'd say, look, the reason why water one reason why Thales would think that water is a good candidate is that it looks like it can take all of the manifest forms. It can be a gas, it can be a liquid, it can be a solid. So it's got those things in its favor, and that it's kind of got this plasticity. But nevertheless, it's water. So you got this problem. It's like, why pour water in the form of water on water in the form of fire whenever it's burning something water in the form of wood that turns it so that it's no longer fire water. Now it's just water, and it's wet, right? So it's like, it looks like water just now, it was supposed to play a kind of an explanatory role, but now that I used water in all those cases, water doesn't mean what it meant anymore. Looks like it does too much. And that's the insight.
That's an insight.
That Anaximander has, is that, like, okay, water is supposed to mean something very specific, but whenever I use it in all those cases, it looks like it becomes something less and less bounded.
Right. Good.
So, okay. So we see the arc to that. So far, so good, right? So that's an advance. Notice, by the way, we'll pause for just 1 second and say Anaximenes, the third of the Milesians, went to air afterwards. Was that backsliding by your reasoning, Ron?
Yes.
So we'll pause for a second and say, yeah, so that seems to be one of the, and one of these interpretations is the APEIRON is a kind of a transcendental, it's kind of like a transcendental reading of the APEIRON. It's a kind of a non-manifest form that's got to be sort of at the base of reality, and it can't be like any being. Being with a big B can't be like any beings with a small b, or something
That's
like
right.
that.
That the elemental stuff can't itself have properties.
Right. So,
because then it's not elemental. The property, okay, good.
And so but notice, by the way, that these guys are all of these guys are empiricists. And so one of the pushbacks is, we don't know what we're talking about whenever we go to this, right? It's like, I don't know what the unbounded is. I don't know what this looks like. Whenever Anaximenes goes to air, he's like, look, this is just, and so you said, like, it looks like it's sort of not descript enough to be able to have the sort of the contradictions with water. But his response is, but air is really nondescript, right? It's kind of not got a lot of really sort of heavy-duty properties. Moreover, there's a physical thing that we can do with air that explains certain sorts of things. Expansion and contraction do this, and we think of heat as the expansion of things, and he even called making rocks with air felting. They kind of gets all pressed together. So there's a kind of, so his thought is, yeah, I'm a better materialist and I'm a better empiricist because it's still stuff that we can see and have models for physically. Okay.
It still doesn't look to me like it can be the arche, because we can give explanations of it.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's one of the nice things, which is that it's not just that water needs to do some explaining. One question then is, well, why is water that way? Right? And you can do the exact same thing with air.
Right.
Yeah.
And it looks like there's a kind of category error looming when you say, well, what makes the boundless boundless? You know what I mean? Like, it looks like the APEIRON is playing, looks like Anaximander recognizes that the elemental stuff has to be stuff in a different sense of the word stuff.
Great. And that's in some ways kind of what that two levels thesis with all these guys are committed to. It's like you've got manifest reality and it's a buzzing, blooming confusion.
Right.
And then there's a bottom level that's a kind of a unity, that's a kind of a one kind of thing. And it looks like it just has to be a different kind of thing to have that unity.
That seems right.
So far, so good. So he's outpaced his other Milesian counterparts. Best out of three, right?
Such as it is. Good.
Such as it is. But now the second part was this doctrine of compensation, that the contraries pay penalty to each other. So so Simplicius even editorializes at the end. He says, as he says in rather poetical language. Oh, Simplicius. He's a regular editorializer. You get it in full bore with that one. So here's a question then. What makes that sound like nonsense? What makes that sound so strange then?
Well, so that...
It's no longer, I mean, the crucial thing is that the nice thing about the other physical manifest forms is that we had physical explanations for why the changes happened.
I just don't understand the normative language, that somehow the decay of the decay of things that we can point to, not the thing that is the ultimate explanation of the things that we can point to, not the APEIRON, but the tables and chairs and medium-sized dry goods, that those decay because that those decay in some way having to do with their injustice to
their opposites.
Well, it says to their element.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The things that are perish into the things from which they come to be according to necessity, for they pay penalty and retribution to each other.
Now that is what I don't get. So it's not that
for their injustice.
Okay, so for their injustice is a part I don't understand. Why you would even need to say that. But secondly, since all things come from the APEIRON, right?
Yeah.
Why is it that they're paying penalty? Why are the tables and chairs paying penalty to the coffee cups? If of necessity they return to that from whence they came. Is the thesis that the tables and chairs ultimately come from the coffee cups? No, it can't be that. It's got to be everything ultimately comes from.
It's the things that they perish into to become something else. So one reading of this is that the contraries pay penalty to each other. So the hot and cold. The hot things become cold, and hot has paid penalty to cold by its injustice of eliminating the cold. And the cold then is doing some injustice to hot and paying. And so it's this. So again, this is sometimes called the doctrine of compensation. That in some ways what they're doing is that it's a cycle of retribution between the contraries. That things that are not, in some ways, are made not by the things that are, and whenever the things that are fall into what's not, right? Because whenever they become something that they're not, they're paying penalty to those things that are not. And one thought here is that if the APEIRON has got no determinate physical properties, it cannot be a physical reason, right? We have no physical reason explanation as to why transitions happen the way they do. There's a law-like relation between these. Right. And if it's not going to be a physical law that explains that, like we have with water or with air, it's got to be a different kind of law. What kind of law have we got? The lex talionis. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And that's the deep kind of explanation. That's the natural law, that all of our retributive inclinations that we have with regards to each other are really actually manifestations of a much deeper kind of normativity in nature.
Right, but if it's by necessity,
yes,
that these are in competition and in contrast and in conflict with each other, I don't know what sense it makes for them to say that they have to pay retribution.
Right. Yeah. So, where is where
do you get desert or injustice?
What's the injustice if the thought here is that we're constantly switching back and forth? Right?
Of necessity.
By necessity. Right. So if it's by necessity that they do this, well, I guess the thought here is that are they paying retribution by necessity?
They're paying retribution for their hostility towards their opposite.
By necessity, yeah.
But I guess that's by necessity. The opposition is by necessity.
So in some ways, this is a kind of a question as to what the necessity is ranging over. So the things that are perish into things from which they come to be according to necessity. So your thought here is that, look, it's an injustice only if you could have done otherwise.
At least it complicates. Right? It complicates the idea that there is some justice that's supposed to be served by means of this retributive conflict.
The retribution is the justice.
Yeah, right. That the retribution is the justice. Why is it moralized at all if it's driven by something that is necessary?
Right. What is the necessity of this?
Well, how does the fact that it's necessary? How is the fact that it's necessary consistent with there being a normative upshot of it?
So I guess so. In some ways, this is the challenge, which is if the APEIRON is supposed to be our base explainer, then we have a question. Then what is the necessity that makes it so that these things perish into the things from which into which they're going to come to be? If that's the necessity, how is that related to the APEIRON?
That's right. That looks like now you've imported another kind of
necessity.
RK, right? Yeah. Another thing that plays a fundamental explanatory role.
What? Yeah. So if the RK is APEIRON, then why do we have determinate things that are contraries and they must be switching back and forth?
That seems the problem, and it also looks like it's not. It's less consistent now with good materialists.
Oh, right. I mean, this is one of the challenges, which is that the RK is supposed to be something that's material still. They're Milesian monists. The one thing is still something that's material, but it looks like all the explanatory stuff is no longer a non-material explanation because the material thing is not definite enough for any kind of explanation from the RK, from the core, from the parts of being.
Right. And also the introduction from whence we don't know of the normative aspect of this process also looks like it's not good materialism.
Oh, I think that's just the argument that that's why it's something that's a product of our nature. It's still naturalism. Oh,
Philosophy 15, folks. can make philosophy out of almost anything.